Welcome back to Comp Sci, and today we are going to go through topic 1.2.7, which is constructing suitable representations to illustrate system requirements.
So a lot of this topic is about drawing diagrams and knowing the symbols for the diagrams. So we do have the handout here which shows you a couple examples. Shows you a couple examples of the flowchart diagrams, but there are more that you should be taking a look at the handout, which will actually tell you what each one of the little symbols means. So please take some time to figure out what each of the symbols means and how to actually draw them, because when you get a question like this on the test, you're not going to have a reference table to look at to figure out what shape you should be drawing. You have to remember what shape you need to be drawing.
And they don't get as simple as the logic diagrams that we did, where you could just draw a circle and write what it meant inside of it. You do have to actually know those specifics of it.
Yeah, each shape is specific. But anyway, so just real quick, your types of data processing, you can read through this. It's online processing, real-time processing, batch processing. Example question here. This example question you should be answering and handing in to us on paper, but the question states, state two applications of real-time processing. So come up with some examples of some ways we could be doing some real-time processing and why. Three types of illustrations. You've got a system flow chart, a data flow diagram, and a structure chart. Most of our symbols are going to apply mostly to just system flow charts and data flow charts.
So this is an example of a system flow chart that you have in your notes here. It represents the different parts of the system and how they're linked together. So this diagram can show some of the hardware that's involved within the system. Whereas when you get into the other ones like the data flow diagram, the hardware is not included in that. So you do need to know that difference, where this is showing every single piece of it. Data flow diagram is going to go into a little bit more detail of what's on the inside.
Your system flow chart could also show the movement of data within the system, but it has to show the hardware that's involved in the system. So if you were talking about an example where there was a monitor and a keyboard involved, you would actually have to draw out and list in there those type of input and output devices.
So if you go to your handout that we have right here, for topic 1.2.7, you'll see this box of different symbols. And these are the system flowchart symbols and what they mean. They're very specific. So you do need to sit down and really look at what's going on and how they work. And we can give you some other examples of some fully done ones as well.
So basically your first symbol there is an action or process. It's an action or process that the computer hardware does. Your second symbol is your input or output device. So your monitors, your keyboards, your mice, whatever it is, a touchscreen keypad, whatever it is in the example that the people or the human resources are using to input data or to get data basically given back to them, has to go in one of these parallelograms.
And notice how it does say description inside, so you are writing words inside of that parallelogram.
Yeah, just about every one of these like open symbols, you're going to be putting words in. For example, your action or your process, if the computer is calculating something, you're going to write in the word calculate inside that box. If it's a keyboard you're putting input into, you would write in here keyboard. Now the lines crossing and lines joining are two different things. Lines crossing mean that those lines cross each other, but no data is shared between them. So it looks like it jumps over it, and that's kind of true. Those lines are not technically connected. Where your lines joining, they are connected, and data can flow between them. Now obviously somewhere over here and over here and over here, you would have some arrows representing the direction of data flow.
Which is what these next ones are. So the first two are pretty straightforward. That one, everything's going towards the right. That one, it's going towards the left. This one means that it can travel in both directions. And things can flow back and forth depending on what you're trying to do and where it's coming from within your system.
So then you've got a document, you've got a tape, you've got disk and online storage. I haven't seen tape too often, so I wouldn't really worry about it. But your disk is going to be like hard disk storage in your desktop. Your online storage is cloud storage. And then you have the communication link. communication links are always two-way unless you say there's only one direction.
So that's it for our system flow diagrams. This then goes into our data flow diagrams, where you only really have 4 different things that you can do. These are a little bit more straightforward because it's not talking about what type of storage do you have, what type of data do you have, what the hardware is. It's just what's happening with the data and the information that you have. So your process is going to be a rounded box, and that is where you put the operation of what's happening. That's a verb, like calculate, like we said before. Your data flow is the direction of it. Then you have your data storage. And if it's being held on a disk, it has this kind of open side there. So make sure that you're being careful of that and that you're not closing it out, because that is going to be something external that we have.
Then you finally got your structure charts, which basically just show the structure of your data and your hardware systems. But these, like I said, I haven't seen too many of these. They're not as important as your data flow charts and your structure charts. All right, so let's go through a particular example. I didn't actually open a Smart Notebook file yet, but while she's doing that, basically we have an example here of a system that is using a keyboard and a monitor, and the person is inputting data for birthdays. So I'll actually read you the example here. It says, a system flowchart describes the hardware and software components of a system that is used to extract upcoming client birthdays. From an online database, a computer program, Calculate, reads the client's file, this is now called clients, from the online databases and writes the names to a new online file called birthday. The data is entered through a keyboard. All errors are sent in an error report to the monitor.
This is what happens when you don't have enough RAM in your computer. It takes a while to load, but it's getting there, I hope. All right, so now we have our question written out here, and we are going to try to draw this system flowchart.
So you should start with the computer program first, put it in the center. It's an action. I've got my book out here. So it's an action, so it's going to be the square box right in the center. Now inside that square box, we're going to write the word calculate, because that is the action or process that the computer is going to actually do. Now, the person using the program actually has to use a keyboard to input data. So, above the calculate box, we're going to put the parallelogram of input or output device, and we're going to name it keyboard, and drawing a line down into calculate. Now, for that, you should have an arrow going down because the data is flowing from the keyboard to the action process of calculate.
So you do always want to show those directions so that you make sure you know exactly how everything is flowing through your chart.
Now we have 2 online databases, basically. It's not really 2 online databases, but it's being checked twice. So it's being checked once, and then it's putting data into that online database. So on the left side of my calculate, I'm going to do an online database, which is the rounded, then straight. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, there you go, that thing.
The rounded on this side?
Yes. How would you explain the shape of that thing? That thing. Now, inside there, you're going to write client online database. You could just name it client because we know the shape signifies it's an online database, but we're just going to be more exact here and write client online database. Now, data is coming from that online database into the action process of calculate. So now your data arrow is going to show that data is coming from the database to calculate. Remember now that calculate process also puts information back into that database. So on the other side, we're going to draw the online database again.
With our arrow going into, or out of calculate.
Out of calculate. Because after it's been calculated, it puts that data back into this online database, and it puts it into a file called birthday. So we're going to call it birthday. Finally, underneath calculate, if there is some kind of error, if there's some kind of problem, calculate is going to send information to your monitor, and it's going to send that error report to the monitor. So your parallelogram, and you're going to write monitor. You could also signify that the only thing it would send you back if there was a problem would be an error report. Notice the question does not say anything about getting monitor feedback because you were right. It just says if there's an error report, you see something on the monitor. We don't have to assume that it does anything else. So that's our final system flowchart for this birthday example.
So when you're doing a system flowchart, you should always be starting with what that actual program is. So start there and then figure it out, break it down into the different pieces of what's going on. So when we read through this, it does tell us, well, we have our program calculate. It's reading this file from an online database. It writes it to a new file, and it's checking from your monitor.
So we have all those words in there if you check. We've got keyboard, which it mentions. We've got monitor, which it mentions. We have the program called calculate. We have the client file over here, and we have birthday file over here. We do have monitor, but we don't have error report. But that, I don't think that would be a problem. You could write in there monitor error report, but that's totally up to you. Now, is this the only way you could have set up this diagram? No. As long as you have all those parts, I'm not really concerned with what order you wrote them in, as long as the data flow direction is correct.
Right, so if you wanted to kind of flip those and had your birthday over here, you would just make sure that you're changing the direction so it's coming out of your program. Okay, so this is an example of a system flowchart. You can see some others in the notes for the other types of diagrams that you can kind of look at. Make sure you're really learning these symbols though, okay? Because the shapes of them do matter, so we do need to work on memorizing what those different symbols are.
Remember, you have to kind of memorize them because we're not giving you any kind of reference table, and it's not because we don't want to, we're not allowed to.
So if you have any questions or anything, please ask. Make sure that you're working through all of your example questions that you have to hand in to us. And I think that's it.
Good luck.